Hey everybody. As we're getting into leading a group, I wanted to show how to close a group. But you all have mentioned.
As we look at the objectives for the week, I want to remind you to review the chapters for the week prior to viewing the lecture, as it is intended to supplement your reading. By the end of the week, you should be able to distinguish the characteristics of a working group from a non-working group, differentiate interventions that occur in the working stage from those that occur in other stages, and identify and describe the important factors in the process of terminating a group. The working stage is only possible once a group has successfully progressed through the forming, storming, and norming stages. And the working stage focuses on the achievement of individual and group goals and the movement of the group into a more unified and productive system. During this stage, members and leaders feel more freedom to try out new behaviors and strategies because the group has worked through the issues of power and control enough for the members to trust each other. In this working stage, peer relationships are characterized by a deep personal level of concern, and self-disclosure can occur more often and at a deeper level than before. The Johari window, which is illustrated below and can be found on page 126 of your text, can be used to discuss how self-disclosure may operate in the working stage. As members begin to use self-disclosure, they experience the risk that comes with others finding out more about them, but also the comfort that comes with sharing information in a safe environment. This makes members more likely to self-disclose, which ultimately makes that lower left-hand quadrant smaller, as there are fewer hidden aspects about the member. The blind quadrant represents information that is unknown to the member, but is known to the other members in the group. This may be unconscious or nonverbal behaviors that group members observe and then share, or impressions that group members have which allow them to provide some kind of feedback in that group. Again, in a working group, this quadrant will get smaller as group members are able to provide feedback to each other. The bottom right quadrant describes the unknown, which contains material that is hidden from the self and also from others because of a lack of opportunity to explore it. A working group helps shrink this quadrant as well, as individuals begin to search for new aspects of themselves and feel safe to uncover and explore new behaviors and a new way of relating to others. Overall, members in a working group become more aware of themselves and grow through these discoveries and insights. Group leaders can facilitate this growth through strategies like rounds, where each member gets an opportunity to provide some prompt or address the group in some way. Through role play, where members assume an identity that is quite different from their own reality and allows them to address patterns of behavior or consequences of those patterns in a new, different light. Or through homework assignments, where members work outside the group to try out new skills in real-life situations and then report back to the group on the experience. Incorporation is a term that describes the process of developing an awareness and appreciation for the accomplishments of individual group members and the group as a whole, and helps members see the value of their experience. Teamwork and team building are extremely important to the working stage of groups, and emphasizes how groups can achieve tasks that cannot be accomplished by an individual alone. Teams rely on openness, honesty, compassion, enthusiasm, integrity, and a commitment to communication. Other factors that contribute or distract from the development of teams include the leadership style, the member maturity and motivation, and the group task or purpose characteristics, as well as the stability and the size of the group, the available time, and the organizational, institutional, cultural, and societal expectations of that group.
Stop it there. How are you doing? That's good. Yes, that's been the rough part because allergies have definitely um, trying to get to the group stage of working and closing. So like finishing up with a group. And I got this, because I wanted to get through all those before you guys lead a group, which you would like pick a date in October. The girls circle. Right. And or this one. So this was another one that I had, and I was probably going to wait until maybe there was two of you guys again, but it is about learning nonviolent communication. So it'll get into like different needs and feelings, honesty, to be seen, structure. I guess there is a need for structure. I'm trying to make sure they're on camera. Understanding, peace, a need for peace, a need for trust and acceptance, compassion. So they have all these. I always forget which one is. This must be the unmet needs. So your need for honesty. And then I think these are the feelings. Yes. So I feel puzzled, I feel depressed, I feel exhausted, I feel joyful, ashamed, inspired, bored, hopeful. So this is a game that can be played in like 7 different ways. So it's good for groups, like I've used it, but see if I can get this in view of the camera. So it's to help understand what makes people tick, put some pizzazz in your party. So I guess you could do it at a party too. Celebrate or acknowledging something or someone, find a common ground when conflict has become default, upgrade your shout or pout tool. I don't know what that is. Shout, pout. Okay. Be ready when someone says, we need to talk and freshen up conversation. So I forget where I got this. It's weird that it's magnetic too. It must have been at one of my agencies. So it's 20 communication cards, and it is good in groups. So this can be another one of the icebreakers. Oh yeah, there's an app. I feel like I've gotten that app before. And then here's basically the book that shows you how to do the group. So it's a set of interactive card games designed to kindle understanding, listening, connection, and interactive, engaging way. I don't know how much you'd have to zoom in. Playing Grok games with your family, friends, or colleagues can open the door for better choices, decisions, goals, strategies to support vibrant relationships, families, businesses, and communities. And you can look them up on the internet. They have a few videos I'll have you guys watch. On a practical level, playing Grok games can enhance relationships and provide support in resolving conflicts. On an intuitive level, playing Grok games promotes social and emotional intelligence and gives us practice in the art of empathetic listening. Enclosed are 2 card decks, 70 feelings and 70 needs or values. Okay, so it's both needs and values. Hereafter referred to as needs cards. Well, that's why I call it needs cards. The booklet contains instruction for playing 20 games with a range of serious to playful, thoughtful to spontaneous, and includes an overview of the foundational principles and practices of these games. So anyway, I stole this from one of my agencies where we led groups because it was cool. I think I just forgot to give it back. I found a laptop I have to get back to them too. It's always fun. So here's your little, it's usually easier and more fun when there's like a few of us here, but like, I feel like the least I've done it with is 2 and the most is like 5 to 10. And it has you get into like real conversations. So I'm going to find their website now. I'll ask my continuous $1 million question. How are your other classes going?
Pretty good. I have 2 that start
Oh, that's right.
October 10th, which is around my birthday. So hopefully that'll be okay and I won't be stressed. I mean, I have a pretty relaxed schedule right now, so I'm doing pretty well. I think work is starting to pick up now, so it's okay.
Where are you at work again? I know you told me. Are you working somewhere?
Oh no, I don't usually work when I'm in school.
Okay.
The only thing is I may have to do classes in the summer. That was what we talked about.
Okay.
Like I worked in the summer. So
Right. Okay. I forgot classes end in a week and a half and then begin again in a week. Like, shit. Okay. We do have some. Do you have any of the classes in social work that will start in the second half? We had HBSE 2, and I think like another intro class is going to be second half, and an elective.
So October, yeah, I think both the classes that start for me are social work.
Oh, they are?
Yeah. and
So
I'm-
which ones are they?
Let's see. I have the schedule. So, it's
Probably HBSE 2 and an elective, I bet.
30/12/01,
Right, that's HBSE 2, I believe.
and then my other one is social work 34/06/01.
Okay. Cool. Well, at least we didn't cancel them. I'll say it that way. Because
Yeah.
we had an emergency come up. We didn't have a director and a few other things. So I jumped in to be director, and then we added, adjuncts that will teach them the second half. So the other option was to cancel them and have you do them next year. And I was like, no, we're not
Yeah,
having any. That'll throw everybody off.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember, but I'm still trying to graduate early. So.
Right, yeah. No, I know. And there's people that are in the same predicament just on time. So that's why we did that. Okay, so their videos are like how to be better at self-compassion. I want to see this. They have a new Grok game. Like I said, I wouldn't have found this. That looks like a bride, doesn't it? No, okay, she's just wearing white. I'm like, is that a bridal dress? Gosh, it almost looks like it. But, because sometimes you get at a loss for this actually looks kind of good, the toilet seat argument. You like get at a loss for games. So, or things to do in the group. So like you're looking for resources, and let me see if these want to work. Of course it won't. Oh, it's probably muted here. I always forget they mute them here first. There it is.
Always forgetting to put the lid in.
I have to tell you once I've told you 1,000 times. Put the lid down. Down. Downward. Do you realize that all your prosperity goes down the toilet when you leave the bed? You know that. You know that's why we're so poor. We have nothing. It's all down the drain.
Don't sway my ass. I don't believe anything.
And so the reason they're using a wolf, and he has a giraffe in his lap. With nonviolent communication, they say, as you get trained in that group, the giraffe is the compassionate. They say it has the largest heart of all the mammals. It can see above everybody, so it can tell what's going on in the background, and like knows if somebody's having a bad day, as they got to see maybe a fight. And the wolf, or the jackal, I think it's actually a jackal, is judgmental and attacks and viciously goes at you. So they'll use, I guess they both have a giraffe and a jackal. And it sounds like right now they're like jackaling each other. Hello. And so this is another group that could be led about nonviolent communication. I like the toilet seat argument, though. I want to see where they go with this, if we can.
Well, you don't have to believe it, just see it, So,
Where's the reading heaven supposed to be found? I don't remember that.
everybody knows.
Everybody knows.
Where have you been?
Why don't you leave the public what it means to me? It's only fair. What, on
Centuries, you know.
Monday, Wednesday, to Friday, Tuesday, Thursday.
You know, I could go on, I've been doing that for another, how many years? Oh, that's not bad. 15, get in one. Let's hear it. Anybody more than 15?
Very conflict.
like to have the skills of giraffe ears and language. Sorry. Kelly or Christine? Christine. Christine?
Okay, understand that.
Your name. Christine.
So when I want to approach it, but I don't want him to be wrong. I really want to approach it in a way where I just want a connection with this sweet, precious person who isn't putting the toilet seat down. And I'm also wanting to get connected to myself about what are my needs. And I'm guessing it's
I think it's supposed to be a common argument too. I don't know if you have this one in your family, but like if you have boys and girls, like everybody fights over toilet seat up, toilet. So that's, you're trying to use a common,
Safety.
what's that?
I said brother and father.
Right, yeah. And so now they're trying to show what a dialogue would look like if you, again, use the cards of like, what's my unmet need? She said safety. And it sounds like they'll do a few more. If I can get it to work.
Try the rear end.
Aesthetics, just aesthetically, I think it was more pleasing having it down.
And the height, I think that is a big consideration and
Okay, we're in agreement.
So he's agreed to keep it down, okay.
Now I know why.
Yeah. He's got his image. So hey, Kelly,
Yeah.
gosh, there's something I want to talk to you about. I'm a little nervous about talking to you about it. We talked about it. I'm guessing,
And instead of yelling, so that's kind of the whole point, is using a nonviolent communication instead of like, why the F did you leave it down again? So that's the difference.
I just forgot to put the toilet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I forgot.
So, wondering if you want to talk about that.
No. Oh, the last thing I want.
You got anything to do about that?
Oh, okay. Come back here.
Gosh, I'm really feeling kind of sad and frustrated because I was really hoping that we could keep our agreements around that sit down.
Yeah. I tried.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so you just don't always think that when you're in there to remember to
I
put
don't know
it down.
what it is. It's just somehow just slips my mind.
Because then you're, not really thinking about that when you're in there.
Yeah.
You got other things on your mind. Yeah, and that's, you just want to kind of do your business and get out,
Yeah.
and not worry about,
Yeah.
put the lid down, and not put the lid down.
Yeah, why do you have to be so angry?
Yeah. Wow, gosh, I'm just feeling kind of torn here, because I'm really wanting kind of sense of cleanliness and aesthetics and.
Look, I said I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. I do. I don't know, I feel bad every time. Oh, no.
I want you to grow.
Yeah.
I want. Well, I should. Yeah, I should. Okay, we're gonna tag team. She's gonna take over. Yeah.
She's starting to become a jackal with me. So this tells us that she needs to do some inner work with herself so that she doesn't have to start to attack me. She can deal with it internally, she can get back in touch with her power, so she can negotiate with me from strength, not from jackal.
Yeah, feeling kind of sad and discouraged. Just really wanting, some cooperation and cleanliness and, this is some kind of agreement that we made. I'd really love it if we can both, stand up to the plate here and keep our agreement.
Yeah, I understand you're talking to Dad about the thing you and I talked about.
Yeah.
And, I've been thinking about it a lot. I've got a really important question. I'm wondering if you're attached to a particular strategy. And if that strategy seems like, oh, if just that one thing happens, if you put the lid down, then you're life, yeah. So, I'm guessing that maybe this whole thing has been kind of connected to how much you cared about yourself.
Like, you know, it kind of feels like a respect thing, like just not getting any respect.
So somehow, toilet lid down equals respect.
You got it.
I feel kind of sad hearing that. So, I don't know. And I watched grandma deal with that, and I'm watching you deal with that, and you know, I want my generation to be really different. And my girl child and I came up with something really cool.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you want to hear it.
Yeah,
I mean, it is so cool.
some device that closes itself.
They do have
More
those.
exciting than that.
Toilet seat closes itself.
We decided, reunited,
And I think,
and we
that was
are
our
big.
show, but like,
It was.
well,
It
no,
doesn't
not
work.
that, but I was thinking of something, like, I went to school with someone that was on, it was Ellen.
Okay.
And he was a kid, but he made a, like a sensor or whatever, so
Right.
he didn't like either put his toilet seat down or flush or whatever, it made a sound to remind him, he's like, oh, I need to.
Okay.
But I don't know, stuff like that.
That's funny. Right, and then they're showing how to dialogue, which could seem long and drawn out, and to some people even ridiculous, but it's taken the place of a big fight, because you see how big fights go too. So I'm sure in the family there's always fights, and few minutes left, but and then I want to show more on the grok stuff.
The toilet seats down ourselves. However, I guess that's not so exciting for you.
Well, you know, I could do it. I mean, I could put it down. I just wish you would. Consider it. Just wanting that
I'd like him to think of it, even though for 40-some years he hasn't been. I guess that's what worries me, you know, it hasn't been important to the mom.
And 42 years, actually. A long time.
I just hear that how much you'd still like him to do that thing. And that's what just feels so sad, is watching from a distance around and seeing.
Yeah, I'm saying that I may put a lot of energy into something that I'm not getting much results.
For that one
And I'm really wanting some peace of mind around this. So maybe we'll find out some other strategy.
Well, thanks for hearing me out, and I really do want you to have this sense of peace around it, and hearing how much you like that, and some way of working with that around it too.
Yep, you got it. Yeah, so I think maybe I'm just gonna let it go. Not be so anal.
Ah,
Yeah.
you were the one getting, because that was just that he used. Or no, he don't, no, he told you, but she got it. I get those mixed up.
So, honey,
Hey, thanks for, yeah.
Yeah. I kind of thought, you know those toilet lids that kind of just touch them and they sort of close themselves? How would you feel about maybe getting one of those?
Time investment, say an hour.
Yeah. What if we had anything to rest?
Yeah, and you know what? I've been doing some inner draft journal.
I see that.
I drafted people. I've been looking at comments such as, what I said when you did, and I don't do it. And I got some ideas about it. But share with you.
I'm like, here, that.
I feel so bad when I forget. And then you take it because you're not cared about and not loved. You know what I do? I tell myself I should do it. I really should. What's wrong? It's a simple thing. A minor thing will make it feel so loved. And the more I tell myself I should do it, the more I feel guilty when I don't do it. And then the more I don't want to think about it, the more I forget.
I see that kind of inner conflict.
And then also the other thing is it's like you're not going to love me if I don't do it. And then I just want to validate that. It's like after that I get play that game on that. And then I want to forget too. And I'm worried it's something like my anger or protecting my freedom or something.
Sounds like you're shooting on yourself in the back.
Bro.
I'm so relieved with this rapper that I am, that I'm finally working this out.
will help you remember is if you tell me you still love me even if I forget. I think the big performance anxiety pressure.
That's actually kind of funny. That you should- So that's one way they use those cards, and it's a nonviolent communication group. So it's called CNVC, Center for Nonviolent Communication .org. And there are groups all over and lots of good videos. So see if there was a quick explainer of them. Oh, this looks like an even bigger game. So I thought they were going to actually explain a little bit, but here's one. So they've trained us in self-compassion too, to like try to fight a little less so there can be some harmony. It's
adept at self-criticism. We learn how to tell ourselves off for our failures and for not working hard or smart enough. But so good are we at this that we're sometimes in danger of falling prey to an excessive version of self-criticism, what we might call self-flagellation, a rather dangerous state which just ushers in depression and underperformance. We might simply lose the will to get out of bed. For those moments, we need a corrective. We need to carve out time for an emotional state of which many of us are profoundly suspicious: self-compassion. We're suspicious because that sounds horribly close to self-pity, but because depression and self-hatred are serious enemies of a good life, we need to appreciate the role of self-care in a good, ambitious, and fruitful life. To this end, we can perform what we've called a self-compassion exercise, a structured meditation lasting 15 minutes or so. Lying in bed or perhaps a bath, turn over a sequence of thoughts that interrupt and correct the flow of your worst self-accusations. For a time, adopt an entirely kindly perspective on your setbacks. The self-compassion exercise goes like this. We're so in love with success, we fail to notice the scale of the challenges we routinely set ourselves. There is nothing remotely normal about what we've tried to achieve. We've failed, but given the mountain we were trying to climb, the conclusion doesn't have to be that we're simply foolish. We have tricky family histories, we all do. There were things which happened to us at the hands of others which can help to explain some of our current troubles. We're not entirely sane or well, but none of us are. We weren't well set up to carry out certain tasks. It isn't wholly our fault in the here and now. From the media, you'd think everyone was rich and famous and successful, but in reality, undramatic, quiet failure is by a huge margin the statistical norm. We shouldn't tear ourselves apart for not managing to beat what were, in truth, awesome odds. Tough, self-critical people don't allow themselves the indulgence of believing in luck. They take responsibility for everything. They think winners make their own luck, but they don't, for the most part. Luck is a genuine feature of existence. We're robbing ourselves of fair consolation by believing that we're entirely in control and therefore entirely to blame when we crash. You are not only your achievements. Status and material success are one bit of you, but there are others as well. Those who loved you in childhood knew this, and in their best moments helped you to feel it. Rehearse in the internalized voices of all those who've been kind to you. Bathe in the memory of a love independent of achievement. It seems it will never end. That's not the truth. It's just how a crisis feels. You need to reduce expectations to 0 for a time. Take each new hour as it comes. And without being banal, what you need most of all is some rest.
So minus the annoying noises that come with that. He kind of details the complications that show up about how our traumas are brought into the conversation or bad experiences of the past. And then we dialogue with others that have their own unique traumas and past conversations and things of that nature. And then together trying to work it out and coming to a common ground. And that's the point of nonviolent communication. It's something that I've seen a lot of agencies use and a lot of even just workplaces use, because sometimes you have therapists and social workers fighting each other about whatever, and it's really good to get to that unmet need. What is the unmet need and a feeling associated with it? And then after that, a specific request of how to resolve it and like talking it out without fighting on it. So I was trying to see where I didn't realize how expensive those things are. I was going to find different places to like shop for them. And I mean, that seems expensive, but maybe that's just how much games are nowadays anyway, right? So if you go to shopping, they are helpful. Usually if you work at an agency, I forget what one you wanted to work at, they will buy you supplies for your group if they're good. If they're a good and legit agency. Yeah, it looks like only these Amazon sellers are the ones who have them. So, have you watched this about Dr. Nadine Burke, specific to trauma?
No, I've seen TED Talks before, but I haven't seen her yet.
Right. She is the whole reason. Have you done much with trauma in any of your classes here yet? And it's okay if you haven't.
I don't think so. The only
Okay.
thing I can really think of is like in my intro psychology classes, we kind of slightly touched on trauma.
Mhm.
And I just, I have my own little picnic things about it that I
Mhm.
know of, and how trauma can kind of actually alter the mind and
Yes.
you can either remember something a certain way
Yes.
or completely forget about something because of the trauma you've been doing.
Exactly. So I'm going to, I thought it muted it. It does. So I want to finish on this. This is probably the best thing. I'm going to cut out the noise from TED Talks because that usually sets off the copyright thing there. So she's good and it'll finish us right on time. Or did I pause it? There we go. She's now the Surgeon General of California.
90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. High doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or pathogen chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California Pacific Medical Center, one of the best private hospitals in Northern California. And together, we opened a clinic in Bayview Hunters Point, one of the poorest, most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Now, prior to that point, there had been only one pediatrician in all of Bayview to serve more than 10,000 children. So we hung a shingle and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities, access to care, immunization rates, asthma hospitalization rates, and we hit all of our numbers. We felt very proud of ourselves. But then I started noticing a disturbing trend. A lot of kids were being referred to me for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But when I actually did a thorough history and physical, what I found was that for most of my patients, I couldn't make a diagnosis of ADHD. Most of the kids I was seeing had experienced such severe trauma that it felt like something else was going on. Somehow, I was missing something important. Now, before I did my residency, I did a master's degree in public health. And one of the things that they teach you in public health school is that if you're a doctor and you see 100 kids that all drink from the same well, and 98 of them develop diarrhea, you can go ahead and write that prescription for dose after dose after dose of antibiotics, or you can walk over and say, what the hell is in this well? So I began reading everything that I could get my hands on about how exposure to adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. And then one day, my colleague walked into my office and he said, Dr. Burke, have you seen this? In his hand was a copy of a research study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. That day changed my clinical practice and ultimately my career. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study is something that everybody needs to know about. It was done by Dr. Vince Felitti at Kaiser and Dr. Bob Onda at the CDC, and together they asked 17,500 adults about their history of exposure to what they called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Those include physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, parental mental illness, substance dependence, incarceration, parental separation or divorce, or domestic violence. For every yes, you would get a point on your ACE score. And then what they did was they correlated these ACE scores against health outcomes. What they found was striking. Two things. Number one, ACEs are incredibly common. 67% of the population had at least one ACE, and 12.6%, 1 in 8, had 4 or more ACEs. The second thing that they found was that there was a dose-response relationship between ACEs and health outcomes. The higher your ACE score, the worse your health outcomes. For a person with an ACE score of 4 or more, their relative risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was 2.5 times that of someone with an ACE score of 0. For hepatitis, it was also 2.5 times. For depression, it was 4.5 times. For suicidality, it was 12 times. A person with an ACE score of 7 or more had triple the lifetime risk of lung cancer, times the risk of ischemic heart disease, the #1 killer in the United States of America. Well, of course, this makes sense. You know, some people looked at this data and they said, come on, you do all these things that are going to ruin your health. This isn't science. This is just bad behavior. It turns out this is exactly where the science comes in. We now understand better than we ever have before how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. So there are real neurologic reasons, and that's important to know. But it turns out that even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer. The reason for this has to do with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the brain's and body's stress response system that governs our fight or flight response. How does it work? Well, it makes a signal to your adrenal gland that says release hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And so your heart starts to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open up, and you are ready to either fight the bear or run from the bear. And that is wonderful if you're in a forest and there's a bear. But the problem is what happens when the bear comes home every night. And this system is activated over and over and over again. It'll be adaptive or life-saving to maladaptive or health-damaging. Children are especially sensitive to this repeated stress activation because their brains and bodies are just developing. High doses of adversity not only affect brain structure and function, they affect the developing immune system, developing hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. So for me, this information threw my old training out the window, because when we understand the mechanism of a disease, when we know not only which pathways are disrupted, but how, then as doctors, it is our job to use this science for prevention and treatment. That's what we do. So in San Francisco, we created the Center for Youth Wellness to prevent, screen, and heal the impacts of ACEs and toxic stress. We started simply with routine screening of every one of our kids at their regular physical, because I know that if my patient has an ACE score of 4, she's 2.5 times as likely to develop hepatitis or COPD. She's 4.5 times as likely to become depressed, and she's 12 times as likely to attempt to take her own life as my patient with 0 ACEs. I know that when she's in my exam room. For our patients who do screen positive, we have a multidisciplinary treatment team that works to reduce the dose of adversity and treat symptoms using best practices, including home visits, care coordination, mental health care, nutrition, holistic interventions, and yes, medication when necessary. But we also educate parents about the impact of ACEs and toxic stress the same way you would for covering electrical outlets or lead poisoning. And we tailor the care of our asthmatics and our diabetics in a way that recognizes that they may need more aggressive treatment given the changes to their hormonal and immune systems. So the other thing that happens when you understand this science is that you'll want to shout it from the rooftops, because this isn't just an issue for kids in Bayview. I figured the minute that everybody else heard about this, it would be routine screening, your multidisciplinary treatment teams, and it would be a race to the most effective clinical treatment protocols. Yeah, that did not happen. And that was a huge learning for me. What I had thought of as simply that we marginalize the issue because it does apply to us. Maybe it's easier to see in other zip codes because we don't want to look at it. We'd rather be sick. Fortunately, scientific advances and frankly, economic realities make that option less viable every day. The science is clear. Early adversity dramatically affects health across the lifetime. Today, we are beginning to understand how to interrupt the progression from early adversity to disease and early death. And 30 years from now, the child who has a high ACE score and whose behavioral symptoms go unrecognized, whose asthma management is not connected, and who goes on to develop high blood pressure and early heart disease or cancer will be just as anomalous as a 6-month mortality from HIV. Will be just as anomalous as a 6-month mortality from HIV/AIDS. This is beatable. The single most important thing that this is real and this is all of us. I believe that we are the movement. Thank you.
I shut out the sound because that's when they know it is like a TED Talk. So anyway, keeping that in mind as we lead groups, it's yet another thing to consider because there's so many dynamics going into it, and knowing a student could suffer in that way can help us from our understanding as the group leader to lead a conversation. So that's all.
I know my advisor is, Ms. Jackson, but do you have office hours after this class?
I can, sure. Yeah.
I just have a few questions.